I'm traveling around the country in my car. I have been driving for over a week from the city I lived in and have so far slept in my car to save money. It wasn't until I got to a big enough city that I decided to treat myself to an actual bed that would be comfortable. I opted to choose Airbnb because it is cheaper than hotels. I booked this Airbnb the day before I arrived in the city, so there weren't many options left. I had found this apartment on Airbnb that looked very new and modern, and it was in a great location. The price was decent for its location, and it almost seemed too good to be true. The only downfall was that it was listed as a new listing and had 0 reviews. I figured that the price was low because it was a new listing and decided to give it a shot. It must be legit because it's an Airbnb, right? When I got to the apartment building, it was older looking than I had expected. I later found out or realized that my Airbnb was most likely the only renovated apartment in the building, and the building seemed to be in poor condition. It looked more like a dorm hall than an apartment building. Anyway, I let it all slide because I wasn't paying too much. So what could I expect? The apartment itself looked like the pictures, so that was good enough. Everything went well for the first 2 days. As a female traveling alone, I always make sure to be safe. I don't go out when it's dark, and I always lock the door, every single lock, including the chain thing. Anyway, on the 3rd day, I was out all morning and came back to the apartment to change before heading to the beach. I had again locked the door, including the chain. I was in front of the door watching TV while changing when the door suddenly unlocked and someone opened the door. I am beyond lucky that I had put the lock chain on the door, or else it would have opened all the way. I wasn't clothed and no one else was supposed to have the keys. My first reaction was, "Excuse me?" and I closed the door right away, locking it again. I came from the back of the door and did not look or see who was opening it. I sat in front of the door, scared and shocked, realizing that this person could technically still get in here since they obviously have the keys to the apartment. At first I thought maybe it was the owner coming back after I checked out, but I was not supposed to check out until the following day, so it was not possible. After crying for a few minutes, I recuperated, called the owner, and told her what had happened. She told me that no one else should have a set of keys other than her and me, and that she was at work and it was not her. I was scared to stay in the apartment because someone could come in. I didn't want to leave because I had all my valuables there. It was a lose-lose situation. I then called my dad, who told me that it was not okay that someone had the keys and that she needed to take care of this ASAP. So he talked to her, and she told me she would be there shortly with a locksmith to change it and give me a pair of new keys. She then proceeded to tell me that she had only had this apartment for 6 months, and that before I stayed there was only one other Airbnb booking. She also mentioned that it had been sitting empty other than those 2 bookings because she had been renovating the apartment, which now makes sense why the building looks horrible and doesn't match the apartment. She told me that the only possibility for who that was could be the previous owners or someone related to them. That possibility or theory really messed with me. How is it possible that I was gone all day every day, and the 10 minutes I was home during the daytime someone tried to come in? Did they know I was there? What were they coming in for? If this apartment has been sitting empty for half a year, maybe they did this frequently? Or maybe they saw me come in and tried to do something to me. These questions are constantly on my mind. I just know I am so lucky that I put the keychain on the door, or else I don't even want to know what else could have happened. Needless to say, I won't be leaving a good review, and I won't be staying in an Airbnb that has no reviews or seems too good to be true. After my 2nd year in college, I booked an Airbnb for a close friend, and that I had been eyeing for a while. It was an off-grid yurt, not a typical stay for me. The yurt was situated on a dirt road 10 minutes from the main road. To get there, it was less of an address and more of a turn right at the 2 tires stacked, continue for a mile, go north at the fork. The first night was great. The next day, we explored around town, then returned to our yurt to hang out. I didn't see any neighbors, only homes in the far distance, so given the heat, I felt comfortable wandering topless around our yurt. When night came, I slept without clothes. We heard what we assumed to be a distant party early in the night. Loud music was traveling from far away. Sometime during the night, the music stopped and I fell asleep. A while later, my friend, still awake, heard 2 men's voices speaking to each other. Their voices got closer and closer until one started shushing the other, and they started talking in whispers. Suddenly, they stopped talking and walked directly up to our yurt, shining a flashlight at the walls. All our belongings were inside, but my car and our shoes, very obviously 2 women's, were directly outside the yurt. They then turned the flashlight off. Up until this point, I had been asleep but awakened to what sounded like a stampeding herd of animals growing closer. I remember being in a half-dream, half-awake state where I genuinely thought there was a galloping animal charging our yurt. What my friend later shared with me was that she was pinching me as hard as she could, and that's how I finally woke up. I never felt the pinch. I remember gasping as I opened my eyes for some reason as I was laying on my back in bed. My friend was lying on her side facing me, and she immediately brought her finger to her mouth to shush me. I was now fully awake but frozen because I had no idea what was going on. We couldn't talk because the desert air carried every sound and creak of the bed, and I was trying hard to breathe calmly. Since I was on my back, it was difficult to face her without making a sound, so I had my head slightly turned to see what she was whispering. Every minute, the wind would pick up, and all we could hear was the breeze. The next minute, complete silence except for their footsteps in the dirt slowly walking around us. At one point, they stomped loudly all around our yurt, and I realized that must have been what I thought were the stampeding animals. It got silent again, and just when we thought they must have left, we heard the faintest sound of footsteps encircling us. I'm a very shy, timid person, but my fight or flight kicked in, wanting to scream as loudly and deeply as I could, and yell and fight and kick. My friend was the opposite and told me we needed to be absolutely silent. We were communicating on her notes app with the brightness turned all the way down. When it had been what felt like eternity, she texted 911. The dispatcher was absolutely useless and wouldn't send someone out because we didn't have an address. We kept texting them that we were on a dirt road, and all we had were the directions we sent them, and we begged and begged to send someone out. We didn't want the men to know we were on a phone because the screen's brightness was still bright against the complete darkness, so we gave up on texting. I hated myself for not wearing pajamas and for not having all my self-defense tools under my pillow, but instead in my bag on the floor. I remember completely accepting that I might get stabbed. I thought about what it would be like for my family to find out I'm dead, and how sorry I felt to not explain. I remember in the middle of this eternal frozen state, I heard the zipper rattling, and for the first time, my friend and I broke silence and yelled, "Now!" as if to cue me leaping to my bag of self-defense items by the door to pull my alarm, sound off my taser, and yell that 911 was on their way as my friend dialed them on speaker. I remember making ourselves as loud as we could. I remember the distant siren approaching closer, and I remember packing up my belongings quicker than I ever have in my entire life. When a police officer arrived, he waited as we packed up our bags into my car. He said we shouldn't be staying so far away from the main road, and we agreed. It was supposed to be just a fun Airbnb. As we were about to pack up our last thing, my friend noticed large footprints in the otherwise perfect sand around our tent. They were inches from the tent, and we hadn't walked up that close because to get that close, you had to step over a circle of rocks decorating the border of our yurt. We only entered through the front door zipper, where the rocks ended. The officer didn't believe it wasn't ours despite the significantly larger footprints. He said he had been patrolling the area with police dogs, and that is what we must have heard. I hate that I second-guessed myself for the rest of the night, thinking we may have just scared ourselves over nothing. High on adrenaline, we made the drive home nonstop. We slept together at my house. I was shaking for the rest of the night, and we both slept with stuffed animals, which at our age was very out of the norm. In the morning, I walked her out to her car to say goodbye. I froze when I got to my car because covering every inch were the largest, meatiest handprints in brown dirt. I consider my brother a big guy, and even his hand was smaller than the handprints on my car. I was so angry that the police officer didn't see that. But I was also glad I had proof that someone was there that night. I took so many pictures because I never wanted to forget the image of so many handprints as evidence. The most unsettling part was that my friend shared with me that there had been many recent unsolved murders in Wonder Valley within the past year. When she got home, she researched to ease her mind about what the area was like, and found articles about missing people minutes from our site. I literally recognized every road the articles mentioned as the road leading to our yurt. I realize you may be thinking nothing horrendous happened to us, but I have never felt that deep in my gut, subconscious, complete acceptance that I may end up dead that night. It was a complete gut feeling, and I don't know how else to describe it.
In the year 2018, me and 3 other friends, we were all males in our early 20s, decided to travel to Bali for about a week since it was cheap and we had time. So why not? Our itinerary includes sightseeing, trying local foods, mountain climbing, and visiting bars at the beach. Basically, a typical vacation in Indonesia. It was honestly quite a surreal experience. The country is absolutely beautiful, and the food was amazing. The only issue I had with the trip was the locals. Drugs were really prominent there, especially mushrooms. The streets were filled with druggies dying to sell us their drugs. I am not exaggerating when I say this. One dude even grabbed my arm because I ignored his 2-for-1 deal for a one-way trip to meet Jesus. I shrugged him off while my friends laughed it off, suggesting that I may be passing up a chance to meet our Lord and Savior. He looked rabid and frantic, like he was about to pounce on me like a dog diagnosed with rabies. I didn't feel too afraid, as we were confident that we could handle them since half of them were not even sober. However, that is only the tip of the iceberg. The horror started when we went back to our Airbnb for the night. We had an early morning the next morning and were exhausted. The place was extremely cheap, and it didn't even have a proper locking mechanism for the door. It had 2 wooden doors that swung inward, and the only way to lock them was to wedge a wooden block through the holes mounted on the door. It was quite a primitive lock, but it gets the job done, I guess. Everything was going well until the last night of our trip, when we realized that the wooden block was missing. We looked everywhere for it, but to no avail. I just figured that one of us must have misplaced it somewhere. We settled for using a selfie stick instead, since we didn't have anything that fit the holes to wedge the door closed. We turned in for the night, seemingly not expecting anything since we had already stayed there for 6 days with no issues. I woke up to strange clicking sounds in the dead of the night. I got out of bed, and I thought maybe it was one of the guys, so I nonchalantly approached the noise. My friends were all sleeping, so I decided to investigate the cause of the noise. The ruckus seemed to be coming from the door, so I headed towards them, feeling extremely confused. Who could be at our doorstep at this time of night? I noticed the doors were slightly opened and the selfie stick was horribly deformed. I peeked outside, and I saw 3 people staring through the gap between the doors. They were really close to the entrance and were attempting to push the doors open. I yelled at them, questioning their intentions, as I noticed one of them was holding the wooden block. I was shocked and puzzled at the situation, as I recognized one of the men. He did the overall cleaning for the Airbnbs and pathways during the day, so there is no reason for him to be there at 3 a.m. The other dude asked if the wooden block belonged to us, as they allegedly found it outside of our Airbnb. I definitely smell BS, as there was absolutely no reason to do that at 3 a.m. My guys and the 3 men immediately ran for it. I clued in the guys on the circumstances, and we stayed up until morning came in case they tried anything funny. We decided to report to the reception about their employee, but the description I gave them was not synonymous with theirs. They told me the housekeepers they hired were only females in their late 30s and 40s. This sent shivers down our spines as we came to realize that we had let a complete imposter in and out of our rooms while we were out. Luckily, nothing important was lost, and we got out of the situation safely. I can't imagine what would happen if I didn't wake up on that fateful night, as the doors were close to being opened. I was just grateful that it was our last night there.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and leave a like. You can submit your stories to our email in the description. Stay safe. See you guys in the next one.